It's an obligatory crossover video. I mean, what else can I say? Thanks for joining me today. My name is Daryl, and I am the host of Read Your Comics. I had to look at this book, right? I've been doing Superman and Fantastic Four movies. We're in the between week of the two movies coming out in the summer of 2025. So let's roll it back to 1999 when Superman and the Fantastic Four first met. Well, I guess they didn't really first meet here, but this is their first time they actually shared a book together, correct? This isn't the Treasury size edition. Marvel and DC had not put out a treasury sized crossover since, I guess, the 70s. All of those crossovers that came out throughout the 90s were all just standard size comics. Prestige format, most of them, but none of them in this, larger treasury size. DC probably published this because they had already been doing the treasury sized Alex Ross books at this time, whereas Marvel, they didn't do a Treasury book until Ed Piskor made him do X-Men Grand Design in a Treasury-sized edition. But, it's cool that they did this one. I've got some issues with the way it was printed and binded, which I'll show you as I jump into it. But I guess it was worthy. You're talking about like the first DC character and, Captain America, arguably, Human Torch, and Namor. But like of the Marvel age, what we really look at is the Marvel Universe. The Fantastic Four, they're called the first family for a reason. So who do you think is going to be the big villains of this book? Well, I mean, you got Superman, so you're going to have Galactus, right? You're going to have Galactus and Krypton. Galactus, devourer of Krypton. Superman, herald of Galactus. The Fantastic Four, Earth's only hope. The infinite destruction is upon us. So who would make sense as a Superman villain to go along with this? I would think it would be Brainiac, right? No, that's not who we're going to get. You'll see, and it actually does kind of make sense, but it's not what I would call a definitive Superman villain. It's particularly one that like all audiences would know. It's going to be one from the 90s that if you were reading Superman you knew about, but if you weren't reading Superman you'd be like, who is this guy? But it does kind of make sense. Dan Jurgens penciled this cover and Alex Ross painted over it. So that's why you definitely get the Alex Ross kind of like colors and sheen to it, but the figure work and stuff is very much looking Dan Jurgens-y here, right? Dan Jurgens was pretty much the lead writer of the Superman Triangle era from, about 1992 or late 91 on through, I guess, about 2000 is maybe when he got off the book. I guess this would be just following up the Superman Red, Blue, Electric Superman era too, because Superman's returned to his standard traditional haircut. He didn't have the mullet. He came out of the death and returned to Superman. He had a mullet. He pretty much had that mullet all the way through until he turned into the electric blue Superman. After that storyline, when he returned to normal, he had his normal hair back. It's just how it works, I guess, right? But the Fantastic Four is wearing their costumes of this era, which at this point, 1999, Chris Claremont, Salvador Larroca were kind of in the thick of their run, which I have opinions on that era of Fantastic Four. I don't think it was a great one, but you got to pick this up. Now, I did buy this when it originally came out. Full disclosure, I didn't love it. I didn't love it then, and I eventually sold it. Fortunately, this showed up at my local comic shop, and the guy sold it to me at a very cheap price, because I needed to have it for this YouTube channel during my months long of alternating between Superman and Fantastic Four videos. I had to cover this book. There was no way around it. But had I not gotten it for a good price, I probably would have skipped it. I'll be honest. Anyway, before I do, I've got a Fantastic Four playlist. I've got a Superman playlist. Go check both of those out. One day I might have a Marvel DC crossover playlist. I should make one because I've done some amalgam videos and stuff. If I have one, go check it out. If I don't have it yet, I will eventually. And as always, please subscribe so you don't miss any future videos. If you haven't subscribed already, double check. Just double check, because a lot of people don't realize they aren't subscribed until they look. All right, let's jump in to the obligatory Superman Fantastic Four crossover from 1999. All right, here's the binding issue already. See, when I pull this open, it's pulling this page up with it. And you can't really open it fully flat without completely, just bending and mangling the spine. And while I'm not like some super duper conditions snob about things, I mean, you can see the waviness in it right here where it's glued together. So I'm going to complain about that probably more than once as we go through this video. Just know that I think whichever side decided to publish this, it was printed in Canada, DC Comics, a division. I think it was DC. I don't remember those Alex Ross books having this problem, but I don't have those anymore either, so I can't compare. Anyway, we see a world here that is, on the verge of collapse. There's Galactus. You see a rocket shooting off from the planet, and Galactus is going to put like a tracker on it that, he's going to need use of that someday. You've got a awesome splash page here of Galactus, like kind of a 2-page spread. Dan Jurgens is doing the art. He's writing this. He's doing the layouts. Art Thiebert is doing the finishes, whatever that exactly means. And it looks very Dan Jurgensy. I don't think Dan Jurgens is the best artist or the best layout guy, really. Even I don't not like Dan Jurgens. I think he did some really fun Superman stuff. I think he's very average when it comes to like art and layout, though. But he does do some pretty good splash pages here. I think Galactus lends himself to that. So he actually catches the little baby Kal-El pod and infuses it with some cosmic tracking energy. And this other, like, crystal or whatever arrives on Earth in the present. We see this character cloaked in shadow, sees this Kryptonian looking crystal heading towards Earth, and snags it up first. We're going to start in Metropolis. There's some kind of thing here, like big bomb or machine going off. Superman has to come in and stop it. So Dan Jurgens, obviously known for doing big Superman splash pages. He did the Death of Superman issue where every page was a splash page, and that's what we get right here. It just feels it's kind of stiff. That's what I don't love about Dan Jurgens and his art style. So some sort of bomb or something with a radio signal that Superman's able to track and, heads over to stop these guys, and he finds the Kryptonian crystal, which appears to be a message from Jor-El. And Jor-El tells him about Galactus, and that Galactus is actually the one that devoured Krypton, or accelerated the process of Krypton that was already in the early stages of dying. I like that concept. That's a neat concept for this crossover. And I think if you had left that to being just this like outside continuity of either team storyline and just had that be the thing, the FF and Fantastic Four, or the Fantastic Four and Superman, they exist in the same world, and Galactus devoured Krypton, and that's how they learned about it. That would have kind of been neat, right? That's how the original Spider-Man and Superman books were. They existed in the same world. There's a really awesome Steve Rude, Roger Stern Superman Hulk book that came out about this same time, that it's just classic Superman versus Hulk in the same world. There's no trying to like explain that they're from different universes at all. But that's not what we're going to get here. Superman mentions that he's going to need Access. Now, Access is a character that came out of the Marvel DC crossover books of the mid 90s, the amalgam stuff. They had a joint character who's named Access, and he could go back and forth between the two universes. I mean, it's a clever idea that kind of fell apart. Now, they've reprinted in an omnibus the Marvel versus DC from the 90s with the amalgam books. I don't know that they're going to be reprinting all the other crossovers that came out around that era, but those Access books, they may have come out in a trade paperback one time, but they're hard to get, and they weren't heavily ordered because it was towards the end of this crossover era. So him just casually mentioning it, I need Access, and you're just supposed to know as a reader that that's what he's referring to, that he needs this Access character to help him get over into the Marvel universe. And I'm kind of glad they did away with that, because I read this with my kids the other night, and I had to stop and explain all that to them because they wouldn't understand that. Even though he's mentioning it casually here, they're making it clear that they're from two universes and that Superman needs to get over to the Marvel universe and that he actually has an easy way to do it. So that has to be explained. And I had to stop and kind of explain all that to him. So for like holding up for a long time's sake, not great. We cut over to the Marvel Universe, where the Fantastic Four are also not in the Baxter Building. This is where they were in the time period. They had this like base on like a pier. Again, they were like, my kids were like, why aren't they in the Baxter Building or Four Freedoms Plaza, whatever they're calling it at the time? It's like making the book in the era that it came out, like the continuities of the two characters, I think was a poor choice on either company or Dan Jurgens, whoever had the bright idea to do that. And you got Franklin in here who's playing with a Superman toys. He's watching the Superman animated series, which is kind of clever. And he's like, is Superman real? And he goes to see Uncle Ben, who's holding up this thing for Reed and telling him that he missed the Superman cartoon. And he's like saying, like, you said Superman was real in another world. Is that right? Another universe? And Sue Storm's like, yeah, he is. He is real. Like, well, can I meet him sometime? I don't know. It's kind of hard to get over there. Da, 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 da. And look, fortunately, Superman's able to just show up and be there right in front of him, right? And I think that's just kind of weak. I do. I find that whole how they met up, how they team up here to be not great. Just because it's pulling from all this other very insular comic book knowledge stuff to get there. This should have been a book that's very timeless. Like you pick up Spider-Man meets Superman from the 70s, that Treasury edition, you don't need to know anything else. As long as you know who Spider-Man and who Superman are, which they give you a page for each character's kind of bio in that book, that's all you need to know. And then put them on an adventure fighting their arch nemesis. But no, here we've got to tie it into the current continuities of the two universes. So Superman's coming to ask him about this Kryptonian crystal and about Galactus and stuff. And, he's Reed's fascinated that Galactus did travel to another universe. That stuff sounds interesting to him. Then something starts happening in the Baxter Building and their machines start acting up and acting wonky. Superman helps stop that. A lot of big splash pages and destruction and stuff. I think this thing looks a little weird, like his rocks are going to like pop off of him and stuff. That's where I'm saying Dan Jurgens, he's trying to make this big and exciting, and there's some cool like splash pages, but again, he's kind of stiff. I think him writing it, not necessarily a horrible idea, but him being the illustrator wasn't great. And I'm sure he was probably getting some royalties for this. This would have been a high selling, high price tag book. Why would he pass it up? Why not do as much as you can on it and get as much royalties as you can out of it? And it turns out the Baxter Buildings Act, or not the Baxter Buildings, they're not in that. The pier, the FF technology is going crazy because it's the cyborg Superman. Who's the cyborg Superman? If you weren't reading Superman at the time, if you did not read The Death and Return of Superman, and you would have had no clue who this cyborg Superman is. Now, I've read The Death of Superman with my kids. They knew who he was, but even they were like, wait, now who is he again? And I was like, he was the cyborg in the reign of Superman. They're like, oh yeah. So like even they had to pause and think about it. And they asked, why isn't it Lex Luthor in this book? Good question. So they're going to fight with him for a minute. And there's a weird like chapter 2 break here. This is a 3-chapter book. Why did they break it into chapters? I don't know. But something happens with that crystal that Superman brought, and it turns him into a herald of Galactus. But Galactus isn't there. It just kind of turns Superman into it. And the cyborg really wanted that power. He was like, no, I wanted to be the herald. Take me. He doesn't want to do it. And it's turned Superman into like a golden surfer without a surfboard. Of course, he gets to keep his Superman symbol to make sure that you know who he is. Now, my kids liked that. They thought this was pretty cool. they were digging this aspect of it. They're like, "Ooh, he's gold and stuff," and they're like, "Well, how is he going to get out of it?" So they were intrigued by it. So looking at it through a kid's lens, other than having to explain this like insular comic stuff that they weren't familiar with, they liked this part of it. So Reed's trying to stop Superman, who's now imbued with the power cosmic as well, and they both get kind of like zapped away. Although that's a little unclear because, like, what's going on right here? They're gone. Because it took me a minute to realize exactly what had happened. You just see them there, the colors getting washed out, and it says they're gone. And Sue has like used a force field to put the cyborg Superman, who's able to turn that metal to red, so he looks like himself. I think Dan Jurgens played a big part with just developing the cyborg Superman, and that's kind of why he wanted to use it for this. But there is another reason I'll kind of get to in a second because they explain it all out here. But I'm really disappointed that it's the cyborg Superman, even in following up on it for my look through after reading it last week. So now they're like, well, you've got to help us find Galactus and Superman and Mr. Fantastic. And so he's kind of reluctant, like I guess I have to either way because I also want to find Galactus myself. It would have made sense to have Doctor Doom involved as well, would it not? So now they arrive at Galactus's ship, which of course looks like the Death Star. And you get a pretty cool page here again of Galactus just looking big and imposing. I almost think it would be hard to not draw Galactus looking cool in a scene like this. And he was able to do this by not even being at Earth at the time because he had done something to that Kryptonian crystal when Krypton was exploding and he saw the rocket going off. He didn't try to stop it. He did something to Superman at the time to make it to where he could turn him into a herald sometime in the future. He says, let the process be finalized because Reed was trying to appeal to his humanity, bringing up someone he loved. He's like, Lois. He's like, yeah, don't give in. And then Galactus does something to him to make him like really, go full herald here. So he goes off to start looking for a planet to satiate Galactus. And this is the stuff like Mr. Fantastic just it looks so bland, this page right here. These panels. And that's where I'm just disappointed in like some aspects. Look at Franklin right here. I mean, a lot of artists struggle to draw children. John Romita Jr. always draws like a big, crazy looking head on a kid. I feel like Byrne did. Byrne does like 12 and up kids okay, but little kids, he would sometimes struggle. Look at the thing's face right there. It's just, he wasn't super familiar with these characters. So Franklin's got this Superman doll, and it's going to be a reoccurring thing going on in here. And they have this ship that Reed was already working on, and the cyborg Superman is able to help. Now, here's the part where the cyborg Superman kind of makes sense. He was basically the Reed Richards of the DC Universe. Well, one of the Reed Richards that has been created for the DC Universe. He and his wife and two others went up into space, much like the Fantastic Four, but where the Fantastic Four all got powers, and other than Ben turning into a monster, it kind of killed his family, which drove him crazy, and he turned into a villain, blew up Coast City, yada, yada, yada. So in a way, he's like an evil Reed Richards. So that's the part that does make sense to use him in this book. And you need this brief page to explain that if you were unfamiliar with him. That aspect of it I think is okay, but I still think a better villain for the Superman side of this would have been like Brainiac. Brainiac was a world killer of sorts too. He could have been trying to get to planets before Galactus would get there, or have a conflict with Galactus where Galactus eats a planet and wipes it out before Brainiac could collect the data from it that he wanted to get from. I mean, there were so many ways you could have spun that. But no, Dan Jurgens wanted to use his character that he liked as kind of the main Superman villain for his era of Superman. And even though this analog aspect of things does work, I just disagree with the use of him. Franklin gives Mom the Superman doll as kind of like a wish you luck kind of thing to go off and try to find Reed. Meanwhile, Superman, Herald of Galactus, goes and finds an uninhabited planet and calls Galactus to devour it, which he does. And he asks Superman if he chose this planet because it was uninhabited. And Superman's like, no, it was just the nearest planet that met your requirements. And he's like, okay, well, let the process begin. So he then starts to devour the planet. The FF with the cyborg, the remaining 3 FF with the cyborg show up, and they try to take on Galactus. Really, they're just trying to take on and get Superman back. They're trying to rescue Superman and Reed. They're not really trying to stop Galactus necessarily. But they're on the planet, so they at least got to slow him down. And you just get some action here of the characters, dodging and weaving the stuff Galactus is doing. This page, he's trying to make this page big and exciting, but the line work and stuff just doesn't land. It doesn't. These crazy eyes that Sue has here, it's like he's trying to make it look a little bit like manga, but he doesn't quite know how to do it. Doesn't work. I just don't think it works. I don't think it works. I want to be nice to Dan Jurgens, but I'm having a hard time. And they eventually have to give up. They lose. They lose this battle and take off. This is a good layout. I mean, the layout of this is good. It's the fine details of it, not so great. You see Superman looking back on the planet that was just destroyed, and it's just like, like the husk of the globe there, not working out for him. Reed, we find out, is trapped on Galactus's ship. I guess Galactus is just going to keep him prisoner. What was the plan for Reed through this? Why didn't Galactus just be like, you're done. I'm done with you, Reed Richards. I've had enough of you throughout these last however many years that we've been encountering each other. You're not where you belong, or send him back or whatever, but he's just going to hold him in like a little glass box here. Is he going to feed him? Is he going to give him a bathroom? Like, what's your plan here, Galactus? So now we get to chapter 3. We're getting to the climax of the issue. Why is it in chapters? I don't know. It's not really clear that why exactly they're broken up into chapters. Notice Sue keeps holding on to this doll. My kids were quick to pick up onto it. They knew exactly what was going to happen here with this doll coming up, so it does end up being a little predictable. So off to another world, and this time it's got some inhabitants on it. That was pretty quick. That last planet must not have satiated Galactus very much. Rarely does Galactus go just from planet to planet to planet, like one right after the other within the course of like a day. Usually it's like he feeds on a planet and some time passes. He's able to go back to his little Mobius strip home world and chill out for a little while. And, there's time between planets. And usually it's while the Herald is out searching around for a planet. Or maybe Superman's just such a good Herald, he's finding the planets so quickly that Galactus is just going to engorge himself. But we're going to go ahead and we're going to do another planet, right? And this one's got some people on it. And we're going to start fighting with Superman, and we've got to appeal to the man inside of this golden husk here. And he does. Ben's able to kind of bring it up. Look, he's on the Sue's platform there. Then he gets smacked back by the cosmic infused Superman and turns on Galactus. Now, at this point, my kids were dying laughing. They were like, every Herald turns on Galactus. Ever since the Silver Surfer did it, he only gets one for an issue or two, and they always turn on him every time. Like, why does he keep getting Heralds? They're always going to turn on him. And it is kind of true. It's like, the Silver Surfer did it. It was a huge moment. And then after that, it's like, every time he has a Herald, they eventually turn on him in some way. So that's what we're going to get here. I like when Galactus shoots his eye beams at people because it's always so, he's never like gritting his teeth, like putting out effort. It's always very methodical or glib. Galactus is very glib. And he's trying to put his two like things together to activate his equipment, and Sue's put her force field up between to prevent him from doing it, which, clever way to slow Galactus down for a minute. And after Superman gets zapped by Galactus, he's on the ground, and wouldn't you know it, he happens to land right next to the Superman doll. Oh, Reed got out. The cyborg was trying to do something on Galactus' ship, and Reed got out and was going to stop it too. Whatever. The profile of the cyborg Superman is always wild looking, where you see like right through his jaw. The Thing gets to smack him around a little bit. They haven't trusted him. It's been an uneasy alliance this whole time, as it is. There's Superman. He's fighting off the will of Galactus and turns just back into his Kryptonian self. Back into Superman in costume. Great double splash page of the 5 characters together, getting ready to take on the antagonist for the final showdown. I mean, really, the cyborg Superman's kind of should be the final villain, because Galactus, it's always this like, Galactus is a force of nature, we just need to save people from him, but leave him to do what he's going to do. And I will give Jurgens credit here. These 2 pages are laid out pretty well. I don't know what he did as far as like how detailed his layouts are and what Art Thiebert did. There's just a lack of oomph in some of these. So Reed and Superman do something to the machine here to cause like a feedback. He's like, on my mark, drop your shield, so he can push it together. But then it ends up draining the energy from Galactus and kicking it back to the planet instead. And it's weakening Galactus, and, Galactus is like, what have you done? Stop! And, he has to make a deal with Reed Richards to reverse it so that it doesn't keep going on. Done. He'll end it if he reverses it back, and he does it because the word of Galactus is his bond, and blah, blah, blah. It's the usual kind of stuff. And then the cyborg Superman, and in this, we find out Galactus did not really devour Krypton when he arrived at Krypton. It was already exploding. He did, put the message on, or the tracker on baby Kal-El, whatever you want to say. And it turns out that message from Jor-El was the cyborg Superman, was that shadowy figure we saw at the beginning of the book. He got the crystal, messed with the message that was being sent to Superman, and all in a ploy to try to get to Galactus, because he either wants to become Galactus's herald or take over his technology and, become Galactus. Whatever was his diabolical plan there, and it didn't work. He wants to be his loyal servant, says, give me what I deserve, give me perfection, very well, and blast him and turns him into like a brick. I don't know what the point of that was exactly. Amazing. A flawless alloy condensed to a form of simple perfection, probably without thought or consciousness. So he bricked him. He turned the cyborg into a brick. He's no longer functioning. They return back. Superman gives the doll back to Franklin, tells him how it kind of helped save the universe, which makes Franklin feel pretty cool. And he gives Franklin his cape as he flies off to return back to the DC universe. And that's our crossover issue. By now, you're seeing this. I've seen the Superman movie at this point, and we're heading into Fantastic Four week. So, full steam ahead, and until next time, read your comics.